Charles, it's Saturday.
But here we are.
Still Sunday with Charles. This is kind of an emergency edition of the show with the seeming appeasement of the deep state by President Trump in the missile striking of Syria over what is seemingly, quite obviously, a false flag use of chemical weapons.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in some great depth. There have been a lot of breaking developments. It's been a news overflow, a news avalanche. And you're absolutely right. The battle has been joined now for many months. The deep state against the people who voted for Trump and sided with Bernie, who are dissatisfied with the establishment and the status quo and what's happened to the ordinary American in what I would argue is we've argued is a 30-year war beginning around 1988 against the people either in the middle class or aspiring to join the middle class. A 30-year war that has been led by those who favor globalism, unregulated globalism, and they did not expect for Donald Trump to happen.
Right.
And he did happen, and they've been fighting tooth and nail because they know that if he is allowed to go into the zone he wants to go, a lot of scalps are going to be gotten here, and a lot of people are going to go to prison. So what we want to do is cover this Russia-U.S. spat, which let's hope does not escalate into armed conflict against the two nations, then rapidly escalate into nuclear war.
Yeah.
Because that would be a rather big downer.
Yeah, and not the Australian kind of downer, although he is a downer. Now, so I had prepared this somewhat Russian graphic for today's show, Charles, because initially, that's what we were going to talk about. And obviously Syria, Russia plays a role in that whole conflict. But I want to ask you, for me, that was a moment where I'm not going to say I've given up on Trump, but what a huge disappointment. I think the Trump that I needed to see would have come out there and said, look, we're not going to strike Syria at this moment because we're continuing the investigation to get the facts and details of who actually used this gas. But Trump's been going on a tirade about, Bashir Assad is an animal using gas on his own people. And it just seems like he's right on the deep state. He's right in line with what they want him to do. David Hawkins suggested in a phone call from last night that I broadcast this morning that the fire at Trump Tower was a warning to Trump. And my fear is that this action against Syria seems to indicate that Trump is under control of the deep state, not the reverse.
We're going to get into that in some depth in a few slides from now. I think initially my reaction, I shared the reaction, why are we getting, why we've got the false flag. It certainly seems like a false flag in the UK, the Skripal stuff.
Yeah.
We have the unexplained mystery that you've researched so well independently and with Laura Loomer about Paddock in Las Vegas. Then we get this false flag or seeming false flag in Syria, where no one can answer the question, how gassing people at this day and age, tying it back to Assad, how does that serve Assad's interest? We'll get into that in some...
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, I think I've got a way of wrapping it together, which I hope is the answer. But, if you'll indulge me, we'll do it in just a few slides.
Before we begin with that, Charles, I just want to remind people that we're back here on the Crowdsource The Truth 2 channel on YouTube, which is great because that is a broader audience that allows about 4,000 people and growing to see the shows. And I've added a live streaming service to Patreon that allows the patrons, the sponsors of Crowdsource The Truth, to avoid any of the problems that we're having from the malicious strikes that we've been getting on YouTube. And unfortunately, I've just said it incorrectly, so I apologize to our patrons, and I'll post a link to what we're doing right now so that they can see it. But moving forward in the future, I'm going to be very on top of making sure that the live streams that go to Patreon are coming from Vimeo and are not affected at all by the malicious individuals that have been striking on YouTube. So I apologize to the patrons, and I want to thank the generous sponsors of Crowdsource The Truth. People who want to become sponsors can go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or make a one-time sponsorship payment at paypal.me, Crowdsource the Truth. And of course, the material is always free for people to see on periscope.tv/Crowdsource the Truth, on Facebook, which there's been a lot of controversy about that perhaps we'll touch on, and all of these social media giants trying to control the flow of information over the internet, which we do not like.
Not at all. So as you do that, I'll just say that the art department once again goes from week to week outdoing itself. So congratulations to the art department.
Thank you, Charles.
I look at this and Hillary's eyes, wow. Bill's nose, wow. And who is that?
Well, we've got Valerie Jarrett over here, because I don't know, she's been coming up a lot. She was coming up in some of the conversations with David Hawkins, and obviously she's a critical member of Obama's sort of kitchen cabinet or whatever it would be. And I didn't realize she's from Iran.
It said she was born in Iran. Yeah, her father, Dr. I think it's Dr. Bowman, was asked or went on the staff of a hospital funded by, I would argue, a very sketchy family, the Namazi family of Iran. Another Namazi, I think, either was in prison or is in prison for bank fraud.
Really?
And that family, if you go and look them up on Wikipedia, they've been rich for generations, and they got phenomenally rich, basically providing, they put the O in the opium trade they provided it from Iran and places near Iran into Asia.
Wow.
That's something you try to cover that one up.
You're right. Now, the other thing is, of course, this artwork is based on the famous film Dr. Zhivago, but of course, here we're exploring Dr. She's Gotta Go. And you mentioned Hillary's eyes. Of course, when you and I went over for the book event to try to figure out what happened,
what happened?
I did have the opportunity, of course, to speak with Mrs. Clinton personally, and although briefly, I did look in her eyes, and she had the strange, glassy look of someone with dead eyes. I mean, I'm not making this up. There was a very strange look to her eyes, a similar look that I saw in the eyes of John Fudenberg, the coroner in Las Vegas, and they look like the eyes of a liar.
Or the eyes of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Haven't met him.
Yeah, and you won't. He's still dead.
Still dead, thankfully.
But yeah, I mean, this is actually a selfless comment that I'm going to make here. It's in the interest of people who are trying to disrupt the establishment to have Hillary Clinton give as many speeches and take up as much oxygen
for less money than Snooki.
For less money than Snooki now, yeah, that's a problem. But she can feel charitable, I guess. There's still money coming in.
Right.
And it's in the interest of those of us who want to disrupt the establishment to let Hillary be the nominee in 2020, to keep her out there, to shunt the crop of rising Democrats. But selflessly, I will say, it's in the interest of the American society to have this person indicted, convicted, jailed, and forced to make with her husband Bill and those who might defend the two of them. All these people should be investigated, indicted, and put in prison for the benefit of those who will follow on and learn and watch this saga, learn from it. If we do not go down this path of fully exposing what these people were doing in league, as we're going to start talking about with the Bush family, in league with, it seems, Obama and his people, if we don't expose all this, what this is going to do for the community of fraudsters to say, hey, this is great. In the richest country on earth, you can play dirty, and the moral of the Clinton saga is you get away with it.
Crime pays.
Crime does pay, bigly.
Bigly.
It's more fun.
I've never bought that crime doesn't pay. I feel like crime would have gone out of business a long time ago if it didn't pay.
Right, it seems to pay.
Yeah.
It seems to pay. So that's the overarching message here, but we're going to be talking in some great depth about the Russian angles, about this Syria thing, hats off to the art department. And why don't we, if we can, move into the slide, the opening slide.
Yes.
Yeah. So, think about it. You have to be, sometimes with bullies, the only thing that works is a bigger stick.
Bloody the nose.
In the case of Hillary Clinton, I mean, you're sitting there and, I appreciate that William Jennings Bryan ran many times as an independent and lost. Okay. In fact, let's get this right, my double great-grandfather was a financial backer of William Jennings Bryan.
This is the moment where a little ancient Ortel historical cartoon would show up.
No, we have a picture. There's several pictures of him. His name was Almon, A-L-M-O-N, Spencer. And he's the one who found all the gold in Montana.
And actually, he invented the almond.
No D, no D. But anyway, sure, will she get people to give her more contributions? Of course she will. But that money is money that's going to go away from another Democrat who actually could win. And the longer you keep her in the mix of contention for, helping, in quotes, candidates in 2018 and helping in 2020, and maybe being, the three-time loser in 2020, you are damaging the Democratic Party brand, perhaps irreparably. When you think about it, forget Bernie Sanders, who I think was in the tank, and he may or may not be around in 2020. But, I was out there. You were a Bernie supporter. I know my kids were Bernie supporters. I live in the West Village. There were lots of Bernie supporters. The only rally I went to was for Bernie Sanders, just to taste the energy, see the energy. There was real energy.
Yeah.
I was extremely impressed with the commitment of his followers and with the breadth of their backgrounds. It wasn't just young kids out of college. It was ancient people, it was middle-aged people, it was men, it was women, it was straight, it was gay, it was black, it was white, it was a collection of people who looked at the mess the establishment has created and has in its mind, in quotes, solutions that won't work, in my opinion. But they nonetheless see the problems from a slightly different perspective as the Trump supporters.
Right.
And you let Hillary Clinton in as a three-time loser, rigging the primaries again, maybe attempting to rigging the general election. The Democratic Party does run an existential risk here. And I as I say, I have some reverence for the Democratic Party, and I hate to see it blown up.
They can't even cheat properly.
That's right. When in the old days, the Democrats, when they rigged something, the candidate
they won. Yes, exactly. Lyndon Johnson had that down.
Yeah, John Kennedy had it down.
Right.
Yeah. And then when you think about it, you look. It doesn't take. It's not like the Harvard PhD or Jerry Corsi or that type needs to make the case. You look and you say, all right, the people are on tape. Bill Clinton and others are on tape saying, look, we were dead broke when we left the White House. Now they have two mansions and fancy investments. They were flying around in presidential jets, how much cash. It doesn't take a genius to say, if you were dead broke, at age whatever.
Where'd all the money come from?
Where'd the money come? And that's the people who don't have the benefit of listening to this speech. I think it would be really amusing if the internet sleuths could go out and get transcripts, not just transcripts, if there are any recordings of what she said in these speeches.
Didn't WikiLeaks release the speeches?
I'm talking about hearing her voice.
Oh.
And it was probably a know-it-all thing. You go into the crowd, we're all in this together. I can tell you the real scoop. As happens, and the Republicans do it, the Democrats do it. It's a friendly audience. She's probably saying, we're going to take their guns away. We're going to do this. We're going to soak the rich. And there's no way that this person can win another election. There's just no way. And so it's in the interest, as I say, of the disruptors to say, by all means, screw up the 2020 election too.
Hardy har har. About Joe Biden and Oprah.
And the
Chopra, that would be a ticket.
Yeah, and the alien that they discovered they're hiding. That person has superhuman powers.
Who is that?
I just made that up.
Oh.
Come on. There's got to be somebody in the Democratic Party who could stand up here, and it's
dead or alive.
It's not Cory Booker. It's not Gilbert Gottfried. It's not. Come on. Come up with somebody who's sensible,
Cory Booker seems to be a popular. I hear a lot of talk about Cory Booker moving up and running for higher office.
Right. Yeah, that would also not be a good idea.
I mean, I'm not saying it would, but these are the people they're talking about running. The other thing we should address very briefly, Charles. So obviously it's Saturday, and we decided to do the show today because of this Syria strike, and also we had access earlier today to Lee Stranahan, who was with us in a pre-recorded segment that I think what we'll do is run that tomorrow at the regular time.
Right.
Because it went a little longer than we had anticipated, and rather than make one gigantic show right now, we'll focus on your slides and material right now, and then we'll do that Lee segment tomorrow.
Sure, I think that's a good idea. And I want to say, I am somebody who used to enjoy watching Fox News a lot. And what is disturbing, forget the slant of the panels and stuff like that, I can live with that. But, you know, when I turn on television, I'm not doing it because I want to be horrified. I'm not doing it because...
It's just a side effect?
You know, it's just not what I do. You know, like if I wanted to be horrified, I'd watch MSNBC. I'd just...
You go to Starbucks.
Yeah, I do that because I want my tea with 3 honeys. But, and actually I learned, by the way, that, you know, I said to the people on the Sheridan Square Starbucks, which is one of the ones I go to, I said, yeah, this music in here is really kicking it. Is this from Starbucks? And it's a whole bunch of these people who are interested in becoming singers or whatever, and this is how they pay their bills. And the music is actually really pretty good.
Don't they sell the CDs?
But it's I think I heard it correctly, that the local people in that Starbucks put the playlist together in that particular one. And they are different, the playlists in each of the ones. And anyway, I highly recommend it, and I have an enjoyable time in that place, except that there are all these lunatics who go in, particularly when it's rainy or cold. I mean, you get some real... I had a different Starbucks, I'll tell this story quickly, and I won't identify where it was. I'm sitting there, minding my own business, there's somebody sitting next to me minding their own business, and this young lady, happened to be a person of color with thick eyeglasses, comes in and says, "You people taking up all the tables." I'm like, because we got here early.
Drinking coffee.
You know, and they said, "I need a place to sit." So I'm not getting up. You know, she just sits down hard right between the two of us, like in an uncomfortable place where there's and then I realized that she's brought in McDonald's food.
Oh.
I'm like, huh? This isn't like, you know, the Galleria Mall, you know, where you go to like crazy Chinese place or, you know, Nathan's or whatever, and you all sit together. This is a Starbucks. People come in here to, anyway.
But Charles, isn't Starbucks one of these globalist corporations that's killing everybody, where they're growing the coffee and using GMO stuff?
Yeah, a little bit of that, yeah.
Yeah, that's...
But the thing, again, it's just, when you're old, you don't have that many things you could do. It's like the old days when I read newspapers. You know, one of the few benefits that I had left in life that I really appreciated is the joy of taking my New York Post, a fresh, crisp New York Post, and opening the front page. And, you know, it's just nice, it's all new, nobody's had their hands all over it, you know.
The Post is really funny for people who aren't familiar with. Well, page 6, and the headlines were always quite creative, I found. You know, it's good for a laugh, I would say.
Another vignette for you, since you bring it up. So when my kids were in this school in upstate New York, we would have, it was really a nice thing, they'd have 6 Fridays. In the afternoon, all the kids would go skiing.
Oh.
And that's it. With little kids, you know, because you skied for your whole life.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with young kids, you really should have a lot of parents around those kids, because they can get in trouble pretty quickly. And so, anyway, I was the only father who would regularly do this, because the other fathers are all working. Huh. And so I'm out there, and I had brought my New York Post. And of course, these are all the teachers, or all New York Times, all this kind of stuff. And I was like laughing. The cover of the New York Post was Axis of Weasels, was the time that, you know, France...
GW? Oh.
Remember that I think it was France and Germany were trying to obstruct our entry into Iraq. And so the New York Post took the French ambassador, the German ambassador, and they cut the face out and superimposed a weasel on it. And I'm laughing, and this other parent's laughing, and the teacher comes over. "That's outrageous. that's ridiculous. What kind of trash? How can you read this? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. You're reading this over here? And I pointed to the New York Times. She said, yes, that's a paper of record. I said, well, you're aware, the journalist who was just exposed in the New York Times, I forget the guy's name, he invented this incredible, long, complicated story out of thin air. Nothing, no truth to it, no sources, no nothing. I forget the guy, you'll remember the guy's name eventually. Anyway, maybe we should stay on point here. So this is a presentation here where we're going to focus mostly on Russia, Syria, but also get back into the issue of what was going on with Hillary Clinton, what was actually happening with the Clintons, and the two are linked.
Yes.
So if we go to the next. Very quickly, this is, for the new viewers, this is a standard disclaimer that applies to everything that we say on these presentations. We are starting with base materials. We point you to these base materials in all of our presentations, and you can look at them. We've had some viewers come to us very infrequently with questions and suggestions and in some cases criticisms. We're very happy to get all that stuff. You can contact me through my website. I'm on Twitter, as is Jason. We've put up Lee Stranahan's Twitter page.
Well, sorry, that's obviously your Twitter page, but of course, we've got Lee Stranahan, who will have a special segment tomorrow, and people can follow him on Twitter. He's just at Stranahan.
Yeah, and it was a real pleasure to speak with him yesterday. He's been doing this for a long time. He's got a lot of great insights on many topics. But
it was today that people see it tomorrow.
Right, yeah. We just did it.
That's time traveling, Charles.
That's right, we do that too.
We need Quinn Michaels here for you to talk about that.
Isn't he right there? Anyway, so if we go back into that page there, Jason, you've been doing a great job putting our playlist up.
Thank you.
I wonder if we can maybe hit that.
Well, yeah, it's a good time to talk about that just for a moment, because there's been a lot of channel shenanigans. Obviously, the initial channel was, Crowdsource the Truth, and that channel is still actually growing, 58,192 subscribers. Of course, we had a blockchain witness from Steemit who came right out and said he didn't like the fact that 50,000 plus viewers were hearing negative information about Steemit, even though all the evidence we've seen so far indicates that it's a financial scam, possibly, allegedly. Evidence indicates that it may be. And we also have seen evidence that indicates that it's a propaganda machine that allows a very limited number of users who may or may not be affiliated with those that own it and control it, but it allows them to suppress opposing views, and it leaves the opposition with really no recourse. So that's not so good. But luckily, we've been able to persevere, and on the original Crowdsource the Truth channel, you can still access this Sunday with Charles playlist. It's got all of the videos that we've done, whether they've come from the Crowdsource the Truth, the original Crowdsource the Truth channel, or Crowdsource the Truth 2, or even the 21st Century 3D channel, which we've had to rely on at times to do our live streaming broadcasts, because the opponents of the truth, the people who want to knock Crowdsource the Truth out of the box, keep submitting these anonymous strikes against videos. And we've examined in previous episodes how they're doing these kind of targeted attacks, essentially gaming the algorithms of YouTube to put thousands of downvotes on the videos. Again, another practice that we see them doing quite obviously in Steemit. Ironically, that platform shows us exactly who's doing it. Here we just see 1,100 anonymous thumbs down. And of course, what that does is it suppresses the video from the YouTube search algorithm. So when we have on a prestigious guest like Fabien Chalandon, and he presents his evidence along with you, that later Nicolas Sarkozy is arrested, maybe there's something in that episode that certain people don't want others to see, so they're downvoting it in this ridiculous attack.
So the opponents are what? Crowdsource. The easy one would be crowdsource the lies, but it's crowdsource the kooks.
Crowdsource the kooks. It's a lot of kooks, and people know who they are. It's my former associate, his brother, and a band of morons that he's put together, that we have a recording of them assembling this team. I mean, it's very obvious. Also, in this phone call with David Hawkins this morning, he talks about a patent for a social media engineering platform that is intended to do exactly what we see happening now. So it's been explained, it's right there. But people can still go to that original playlist. And of course, we're hopeful that people who enjoy Crowdsource the Truth will subscribe to Crowdsource the Truth 2, where they can see all of the new live streams. We only have 4,290 subscribers there. So again, these attacks, although they are petty and weak and cowardly, they have been somewhat effective in reducing the viewership of the videos. So I hope that people will come to Crowdsource the Truth 2 and share the links and subscribe and continue to watch as we do new episodes and stream them on that channel.
Great. So we can maybe go to the next page.
Yeah.
All right. So you're right, Jason. President Trump indeed ordered limited airstrikes, and there are various damage assessments. If we pull up the first, actually we don't have to pull up the first one, we'll just talk about it. But there's a link to him ordering the limited airstrikes. When I first heard about it, like you, I was like, what?
Yeah.
You know, but I think, and you know, because we have the history of Donald Trump many, many times. Here's the Daily Caller saying all the different times that Donald Trump has correctly warned people about entering Syria. I don't know what happened there. There we go. And this thing has 2,000 Facebook shares already.
Oh,
man. It
there we
has,
go.
yeah. Well, wait a minute. What happened? Yeah, 2,000 Facebook shares. And it is fair to say, you know, look, if you ran back, you know, for many, many times, if you said it was dangerous to enter Syria, dangerous, why do we have troops in Syria? Why are you bombing again? And it's absolutely correct to ask as many questions as possible, particularly when we are putting American troops in harm's way and when we're potentially, you know, killing civilians and other things. It's certainly, given the long track record of the United States since September 11th, 2001 in particular, in fighting in and around the Middle East over issues in the conflict against radical Islamic terrorism, it certainly is fair to ask these questions. I think I have some answers for you if we go back into the text.
Sure.
So before we get to the answers, Assad's motives, we have this story in the Examiner where people I think are correctly saying, this congressman is correctly saying, the public, American public doesn't think that Assad gassed his own people.
Right.
When we go back into the recent history, Donald Trump was criticized for saying we're going to get back out of Syria quickly, or maybe it's time to get out of Syria. And then several days later, there's this gas attack. You know, it doesn't take a genius to look at that and say, now, if the United States found a way to keep Assad in power, what would that do for the rebels?
And their rebellion.
In their rebellion, probably it would end. And if the rebellion ended, that wouldn't be very good for the rebel leaders. And
Right.
who, you know, where did this chemical attack materialize? In rebel-controlled territory. And I watched again this morning several times the footage of the people supposedly treating these men, women, and children. And it just didn't make any sense to me. It looked to me like they were taking a garden hose and washing off these kids and touching the kid with, you know, in some cases, hands that had no protective covering of any kind, no gloves, no suits, no nothing. And if this chemical is so dangerous, why would the healthcare practitioners, you know, try to wash this stuff off in the way that it just doesn't look like it's real?
But everyone also realizes it just makes no strategic sense whatsoever for Assad to do this when all other indicators are that the United States and Russia are backing off, that the whole situation is calming down. And then Rachel Maddow or whoever is on CNN will just say, oh, well, he's a madman. That's the explanation. That can't be the catch-all explanation for everything because, I mean, we see Assad. He's not like one of these guys you're hanging out with in Starbucks where he's just absolutely out of his mind 24 hours a day. He's not like George's brother, who's very obviously out of his mind constantly. He at least wants to control that country, and so why would he do something that would guarantee his own death?
Well, and he's not like some of these lunatics you see, on MSNBC or on Fox as guests arguing incoherently.
Right. He speaks lucidly. He seems a sensible guy. Even if he is evil, he has an agenda, and his agenda, it would seem, is remaining in power and controlling that country. And even if he wanted to kill whoever it is that got gassed, why not just use bombs or guns? You wouldn't see the UN and a coalition saying he's an animal and a monster for doing that, which also doesn't make very much sense to me. But the point is, this is just such an obvious fake thing. How did Trump fall for it?
Yeah. Well, I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
So we don't need to pull up the link here, but we have a lesson plan from Senator McCain. Any chance that John McCain can weigh in, and with platitudes, and then also perhaps on the side market to the various Middle Eastern donors who are going to give him money once he retires, assuming
we have to see that. This is how to arm rebels, or what is the advice?
Yeah.
Airstrikes alone won't.
I mean, it's you can clear how popular it is. It's got 122 shares. It's like nobody cares what John McCain has to say at this point.
Oh my God. He's like, he could get a gig on The Walking Dead at this point.
It's like, are these people? I'm noticing more and more of them around Manhattan, and with the Zimmer frames and the motorized wheelchairs and all this kind of stuff. I mean, the guy should basically focus on his family, step down, shut up.
Yeah, he's a terrible guy for a long time.
Yeah. So finally, or as we get into this, we really deserve, this is actually a pretty interesting story in Vox, which is not a right-leaning publication. We deserve, the American people across the political spectrum, and Tucker Carlson has been pounding the table on this, I'll join the chorus. If we're going to do something in Syria beyond what Trump has done, I mean, what the hell is our plan? How do we define victory? I mean, and how can we collectively admit the mistakes that have occurred? Just thinking about September 11th, 2001 forward, can we go back over and admit what really happened on that day? Okay, why were 28 pages? Was it 28 pages that were missing?
Yeah,
why were they
Bob Graham Senate Intelligence Committee report on 9/11.
Why were they withheld for so long?
15 years.
Anyway, we go into, sorry, I just want to be able to see the text here. Yeah, so the debate, we really should have, I think, if we're going to widen the conflict to another theater, to another country. Libya is a mess today. It is a failed state. It is still fraught with peril for not simply the people living in Libya, but the neighbors and across to the north in Italy and elsewhere in Europe. I mean, it is a smoking, it's actually a glowing inferno of trouble, right? And this is now 6 years after, after the second September 11th. It would be, September 11th this year would be 6 years. We didn't get that right. In Iraq, we spent a lot of money, lost a lot of lives, a lot of people wounded, and it's basically controlled by Iran.
Yeah.
And now we're thinking of going into Syria. To what end and what are our objectives? Now, I'm open to being convinced, but as we were talking before, we spend about $800 billion or so on the military, roughly, all in, that's known, per year. There are very few countries in the world that spend $50 billion per year. let alone 100 billion. We're spending $800 billion. Now, I take the point that the world is filled with enough dangerous people, and that we would certainly not enjoy living under the rule of, let's say, the Chinese if they dominated the world. I don't think that would be a good end game for the American people.
No.
So I take the point that we're going to have to spend disproportionately to our population compared to other countries, but still, 800 billion should get you a lot. And you know, we need to understand what it is we think we're doing in Syria. So here's what I think Donald Trump did here. I think a fair point which was made to me is, or a fair set of points is, in 2013, when Obama talked about the red line, seemed poised to jump over the red line, and John Kerry more or less jumped over the red line, and we did nothing. The reason we stood down then was that in theory, the chemical weapons, all the chemical weapons that had been in Syria were destroyed as a result of Russian intervention with Assad. It's very forget about.
To be clear, you mean that was part of an agreement that Russia would intervene and the United States would dispose of the chemical weapons on a naval vessel, correct?
I don't know if it went exactly like that. I thought it was more that the Russians were the ones who were taking responsibility for ensuring that the chemical weapons that had been in Syria would all be destroyed.
We should check that, because I understood that that was an agreement between the Americans and the Russians, and that the Americans destroyed the chemical weapons. But
well, however it worked, the idea was that the chemical weapon, I think Russia took some responsibility. I watched multiple clips this morning of President Obama saying the Russians told us that 100% of them were destroyed. And, you know,
I could easily be wrong.
Yeah. And so I think the approach here was to say, it doesn't matter who did this, as much as we know where these weapons are stored now, we know where they could be produced, and the agreement that we had in 2013 obviously didn't work. There have been 8 attacks, not just this one. It was the one from last year, and there have been a total of, I think, 8 or so.
Where'd that go? We just had the ship there, the MV Cape
Framework
Ray.
agreement. See, Syria ostensibly met the first deadline for comprehensive disclosure. So they made disclosure concerning all of their stockpiles, but they lied.
Well, somebody lied. Question is who?
Right, and so the point is, for now, it doesn't really matter who. The American response was to go in and destroy the known stockpile and the known production capacity to produce these weapons.
Right. This Cape Ray out of Norfolk, Virginia, is the ship that supposedly destroyed the chemical weapons, and David Hawkins says that this ship flies under the SES flag, not the U.S. flag.
Really? SES meaning?
Senior Executive Services. This,
really?
Yeah, this division of, you know, the higher pay grade, according to Robin Gritz, but basically the unelected branch of the government that essentially is organized crime, according to Field McConnell, according to David Hawkins, according to so many people. SES is one of the most dangerous things in our government, and I guess the suspicion is this ship did not actually destroy the chemical weapons, but kept them and sent them somewhere else, or used them, give them to the rebels, who knows what.
Well, so the other thing I would caution on is that the first step was that the Syrian government would convey, quote, all of the weapons. So obviously they did not do that.
Well,
right?
how do we know that that's obvious? If they said, hey, here's all our chemical weapons, and then this boat came and took them, and they gave them to some rebels, Assad thinks he told them.
But there's a storage facility. We just blew up 3 things. We blew up a storage facility, we blew up a production facility. I don't know what the third thing was, but you know, somebody was in charge of those facilities, right? Somehow chemical weapons re-entered the country. Now maybe it was the SES people bleeding them back into Syria. That's a possibility. But whatever the solution was, we're going to now actually destroy those that we found, and we're going to make it impossible for Syria to create any more, was the thinking.
Right.
Now, I note that the response, I mean, if you were in one of the facilities that was hit by a missile, you know, it's not a trivial exercise for you.
The response is to die.
You're still going to be dead. But when you look at, you know, peak bombing, for example, during the Iraq War and in the initial phases in Afghanistan, 100 missiles is not really all that, it's not a lot.
Yeah, depends which end of it you're on.
No, I'm just saying it's not like we could have dropped a lot more than 100 missiles if we wanted to, you know, destroy all the airfields, and we have the capability to do that.
So it's targeted at these facilities.
I think, as a guess, what happened was, you know, it wasn't like Opie Graham wanted when he first heard about it, Senator Graham. It was, I know Mayberry RFD is not in South Carolina, but may as well be. You know, the second he heard about it, it was like, you know, you're not a man unless you destroy Syria and kill Assad, do this and do that. And, you know, we've done this now. How much Arab Springing did we do? You know, taking down the leadership in all these different countries.
How do they not know by now that this is the worst possible idea?
Right, and it's just, so I think, frankly, it could have been a lot worse than what he did. And if it is true, which we don't yet really know as citizens, we can't check any of this. We're not going to get on you might get on a plane and go to Syria, but I'm certainly not going to do it. And I only say that because you like to travel, and
yeah, Syria's right there at the top of the list.
Damascus, I've heard, is actually used to be. No, Syria. It's a very interesting
city.
Great
deals on hotels right now.
Townhouses.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Well, I mean, it's not out of the question, but it's not in the plans. I mean, here's what I was thinking when I saw Trump speak last night. The only way this isn't the stupidest thing he's ever done, and one of the worst things he could have possibly have done, would be if those chemical facilities are actually controlled by rebels, and all this stuff he's saying about Assad is just talk to appease the deep state, and he's somehow doing his 5D chess of, you know, but I don't think that's happening. I think it seems that Trump has lost this battle with the deep state, and that he's a military industrial puppet.
We'll see. I mean, I think if we go back into the slides, you know, we have this situation where actually in between the time I did the slides and now, there are various reports of Russian planes now in the same place as American planes over Syria. And, you know, when you get two opposing, you know, lethally equipped nations flying airplanes around hundreds of miles an hour in the same airspace, stuff can easily happen. And past world wars have happened just by accident. Like the First World War more or less happened by accident. Second World War, not so much.
Yeah. But didn't they kill the Archduke?
Yeah, it was.
I've always felt that World War III began on September 11th, 2001, Charles, and that this has all just been the industrialized, drag it out and charge a lot of money version.
Well, it sure looks like, when you think back and you look at the numbers, which I do, for the magnitude of spending in 1941 to 1945, you could actually, they had figures, we have figures, maybe they're wrong, but they actually, the figures that are out there make my case, I think, pretty eloquently, that the spending, the military spending, was a gigantic proportion as measured against the total consumption in America in prior years. Even if you go back and adjust for whatever inflation, I mean, it was way bigger than we're spending now.
Yeah.
So
back then.
Yeah, absolutely, compared to consumption. So our consumption figure, household consumption from memory at this point is probably 11 trillion or so, roughly. And I want to say that the military spending for World War II was multiples of total consumption. So, you know, we're certainly not spending multiples of $11 trillion on military right now.
There is an interesting angle, though, you know, Charles. I did an interview earlier this week about the inappropriate burning of garbage and toxic material in Iraq and Afghanistan on military bases. And there's a documentary called Delay, Deny, Wait Until You Die, all about how America has poisoned its soldiers. And I interviewed the filmmaker and one of the victims of this horrible bureaucratic policy where there are literally hundreds of thousands of veterans who are dying from multiple myeloma and various exotic diseases that there are, in some cases, many cases, no cures for. And again, it's a byproduct of, it's a side effect of this perpetual war, this prioritization of money over logic or peace or sensibility. It's just, when you have a corporation that's driven only by satisfying the shareholders with profit, moral decisions, all of that gets eliminated, and the bureaucrats within those corporations, someone can just, sign off on something and no one's got the direct culpability of being the person who decides to burn up garbage and chemicals and poison all the soldiers and basically destroy their lives and their families. But it happens. Yeah,
it happens, sadly, and I would hasten to say I don't think that it is a Republican deficiency or a Democratic deficiency. I think you have Republicans and Democrats both doing this kind of
Absolutely.
stuff. It's more a moral question for we the people here, the citizenry. And as you know, I started exposing what I believe is fraud, continuing fraud at General Electric, which at the time was pretty much controlled by Republicans and Democrats. And corporations do have a responsibility to follow the rules, and there's no point in creating fake profits so that we have fake valuations and our real securities get traded at fake values. That doesn't make sense for anybody, except maybe the executives.
Well, and it's also obviously very, I think, telling and interesting that you were, if not the only person, certainly the tip of the spear in terms of revealing the corruption at General Electric. And then that company is also implicated in the research that Jan Weinberg is doing about, a lot of people don't realize that General Electric is a major military industrial contractor providing avionics and all kinds of electronics, jet engines, etc. So when they finance a campaign or when they have emails with Hillary Clinton's State Department and the Clinton Foundation, and in an open shareholders meeting, Boeing and General Electric and the CEOs of these companies admit that they're just not going to release these emails, that's
telling.
That's telling, and it's a huge deal. This is why all these things are happening. Money, huge corporations, forcing politicians, influencing people to do things. It's very disheartening.
Well, what you see actually, I grew up basically in business, doing a lot of work for family-controlled companies. And family-controlled companies, particularly if it's multi-generational family-controlled companies, they can get into all kinds of trouble because you promote your son or daughter and you shouldn't, because basically you should be riding around on horses or painting or something, but you say, no, why don't you run Bechtel? I'm just making up
Even though you don't know what you're doing.
Right, yeah, because I don't. I'm
not
okay.
you,
I'm just saying, in those kind of family-controlled companies, you can have nincompoops running them.
Right.
But when you have the ones that have survived for a long time, they tend to be very thoughtful, very careful, and they do have that moral compass. They do say, look, we're rich enough, and yeah, we're going to get richer, but this is wrong.
Yeah, maybe we don't need to sell jet fuel sensors to Halliburton and Kellogg, Brown and Root, because they're the kind of companies that would rather burn garbage and kill veterans than do the right thing. Right. So that's an interesting choice for companies like that to make.
Right, exactly. So, but moving back though to the instant situation with Russia, I've actually had the pleasure in the last week or so of being on a number of different channels and broadcasts, including with you. And but I've also been narrowly focused on this issue of where Russia is. And I think Donald Trump has very astutely put Russia between the perennial
Europe and China?
The rock, yeah. Somebody else big did that one, but the between a rock and a hard place, and saying, look, you can go, and if you was kind of like with you and George and his motley crew, if you want to hang around with DeFango and all these people who can't use their real names, by all means, Russia, if you want to, hitch your wagon to the star of Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, Iran, and Syria, you know, it's going to be lonely. You're not going to be, you know, it's not going to be a great life. You better like each of those countries. You're not going to be having a lot of customers in America or the West, you know, Japan, Korea, et cetera. You know, and you're not going to beat us militarily. So you go down that track, ask the people of Cuba how much they like, you know, life in Cuba. Ask the women, you know, who have no makeup and no toilet paper and no food in Venezuela, a country which used to have, you know, very high percentage of the beautiful women in the world come out of Venezuela. Ask those people who are eating garbage in Venezuela how socialism works for them. You know, and stack it up with how Maduro, I guess, is still living there. So on the one hand, we know from the many case studies, and Vladimir Putin, I think, knows personally from his own experience inside when the Soviet Union blew up, that this is a failed approach. And you could hitch your start of that wagon, or Donald Trump has thrown open a large olive branch. You know, we will help, I believe. I think it's not really a government issue. If we were to eliminate the sanctions, and if Russia were to say, okay, actually we're going to discipline the oligarchs, we're going to have real laws where you can invest, put money in, and real mechanisms for you to get the money out, I think there would be a lot of interest in the West. When you look at the numbers, the average Russian worker, and there are many skilled workers in Russia, does not make that much money. I want to say it's like $6,000 or $5,000 a year. Yeah. Not much as a national average. Obviously in global trades, they're going to be on the global market. But overall, they're not paid that well. There's a lot of physical resources in terms of water, energy, other things. There's ancient culture in Russia. There are a lot of good arguments why United States business people would want to serve the local market, would want to maybe transfer technology into Russia, and why in addition it would make sense to have a Russian-based slew of services and other factories trying to sell stuff back into Europe, competing against the European companies whose workers are overpaid, you know, disinclined to work, you know, expecting these gigantic social payments, which who knows how they're going to fund it. Right. You know, so there's a lot of arguments, and we think about what happened between the United States and Germany, what happened between the United States and Japan, and you know, today Germany and Japan owe their economic place in the world to the generosity of the American people, who, you know, having put in a place where we had to fight the wars against those two countries, we then turn around and build them back up, create super infrastructure to the German people and the Japanese people, you know, with some exception, many exceptions, rolled up their sleeves and got to work. And I'm not saying that we should take credit for all the prosperity that came out of Germany and Japan.
But they put them on the right road for sure.
But we have a good record, of helping former opponents. If you think through American and Russian history, we're isolated. We're hardly as far away from Russia as we are from Japan. Mm-hmm. I mean, Sarah Palin's right next door to Russia.
She can see it.
She can see it.
Yeah.
But so I think.
But wait, do you think, Charles, that this attack in Syria is intended to somehow influence Russia? Wouldn't Trump have gotten more mileage from saying, "Hey, the gas attack is somebody trying to fool us, and we're gonna work with Russia to find those rebels," or whatever?
It's possible. Again, to make that, you and I are not in a position of knowing, you know, the real evidence that may be out there and all the various pressures that may be operating. As a guess, like Obama and like others, you know, Trump was put into a position where he couldn't just do nothing. It would be particularly if you're thinking about the message that sends to North Korea, you know, who he supposedly is on the verge of having a breakthrough agreement with him. What I see so far, you know, nothing is perfect, and it's not like hey Jason, would you like, you know, this cake or that pie, you know, for dessert. This is a mess that, you know, he inherited. He's trying to make the best of it. I'm willing to cut him some slack on this one, but I do think the American people should rightly demand at this point, if we're going to rev up and we're going to have, you know, more of this, you know, we need to have a grown-up discussion nationally before the election about the course of action that the Republicans want to take, the Democrats want to take, the non-aligned want to take in these key theaters. Now, we don't want to have these ridiculous debates where one of the candidates, like Barack Obama, sits down with that actor, Zach whatever his name is, between two
Oh,
ferns.
Zach Galifianakis.
Yeah, or I forget if he also.
Hillary did that, yeah.
And I think Zach. Well, President Obama may have at the time sat down with a person who does her interviews, a black.
In the bowl of Fruit Loops or whatever.
Yeah,
She
Fruit
was
Loops
in the bathtub.
in a bathtub filled with milk and Fruit Loops. I mean, that's not something that we should be doing as politicians between now and the election.
No.
Let's have a grown-up discussion. Forget these people from Council on Foreign Relations, or should I say the Council on Perpetual War. Forget these people who are, the traditional experts, that have gotten us into this place where we are. Let's have a frank discussion. I'd like to hear more from people who have been in these past wars. Tell us, what's the way forward here? What should be our objectives? And let people duke it out, not with bullets and not with fists, but, debate the road that we ought to take here. Yeah, this person probably gets, 100 million hits on YouTube, but.
Well, yeah, she's a danger to free speech or something with all the Fruit Loops. That's a lot of milk. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I'm not somebody who's. I understand you can try to make a statement, it gets you on YouTube, but that's a waste of food, and there are a lot of people. I'm talking about the milk, not the Fruit Loops. It's a waste of food, and I'm not really for that, particularly when there really are so many starving people around the world. I just don't. I wouldn't have done this. I certainly will never do this, but.
So there's not going to be a Sunday with Charles episode
And I
where
think
you're swimming with Fruit Loops?
Yeah, unless you want to do it.
No, I'm not going to.
Swimming in kombucha.
Yeah, I don't think we'll do that.
Yeah. So if we get back in, we're on a sort of related stuff. This is a very interesting link to hit here. This is the judge who is reviewing Michael Cohen's lawyer's request to suppress these legal documents is a Clintonista. I don't know if you remember this, but
Why is it talking about a bris though?
Well, I don't know. Kimball Wood is obviously a woman, but she was the candidate, one of the candidates for Bill Clinton to be Attorney General.
Now it says Michael Cohen is asking Judge Kimball Wood to suppress legal documents related to his relationship with Donald Trump. And it goes on down here to say Woods gave a Jewish defense attorney the day off from court on the day his third grandson was born so he could attend the bris. Why do they say that?
I don't.
Because Michael Cohen is Jewish and they're trying to, that's.
I don't know why they're going. This is the Forward, which I think is a Jewish publication.
I see. Well, it is written by Ari Feldman. I just find it strange when people point out religion so much.
Well, this is a newspaper that focuses on.
Okay, got it.
But the point I'm trying to make a different point here is that I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is the argument against what Rosenstein authorized Mueller to do is that you have a narrow right of search and seizure. You don't have an unbridled right to go and say, I'm going to take all of your shit. And then I'll have to
something.
I might find something. You can't do that. You're supposed to go up and say, look, I have probable cause to believe a crime is. Here's what I need to see. Here's why I need to see it. I've exhausted all other methods. And that wasn't the case here, as far as I can tell. That Michael Cohen and his team were cooperating. They were answering questions. They were providing information. So the basis for getting this warrant is, we're back in the same place with the FISA warrant.
Yeah.
We have a team here that's not so good at getting warrants.
Well, they're real good at getting warrants.
Legally.
Not good at doing it according to the rules.
Right.
Yeah.
And this judge, there are many judges in New York who are left-leaning Democratic judges, but this is somebody who was Bill Clinton's early pick to be, I think, Attorney General, and couldn't get across the line for some kind of disclosure problem. This is not a good place that we're in here, and I really feel I don't have a position yet on what Michael Cohen may or may not have done, but the leaks that are coming out from the grand jury room are not coming from Michael Cohen. They're coming from Mueller and his team, and Mueller and his team have a well-documented history of leaking to the press in the midst of grand jury proceedings, which is strictly forbidden. It's illegal.
Well, they're also hiding key information. I think my battery's just Charles. I apologize.
That's all right. we've got a short period here where Jason's going to put some more batteries into his microphone, so I'll hog the floor. So I think the lawyers who comment on this, Alan Dershowitz was a renowned constitutional scholar, young man. As a young man, he was a Harvard Law professor. He's now, I think, a retired Harvard Law professor. He actually, has had a distinguished career, and he says this is outrageous. The ACLU apparently has said, doesn't matter.
That's crazy.
I know, that's just so perverted.
It is. And I just commented on all the, she did this for this Jewish person and that Jew. It's like, why does that have to be the issue? I don't like it whether this guy is pro-Jewish or anti-Jewish. Bringing that into it is like, why does that have to do with anything? The guy's a lawyer. He happens to be Jewish. She let somebody go to her son's bris or whatever.
Again, it's the focus of this newspaper.
That's weird.
But that's why, anyway. Why don't we move on to the next slide. This is interesting. This has actually been rebutted. This is in the LA Times, which is, I think it's the LA Times, right? Or McClatchy? Is it?
Oh, McClatchy.
McClatchy, yeah. Sorry. But anyway, this is Mueller. Supposedly, sources are telling this news outfit that Mueller has evidence Cohen was in Prague in 2016. Well, Cohen has since come back and said that's not true.
Right.
It's just simply not true. And the whole point is, what business does the special counsel have leaking on this scale to get this kind of a news story? Doesn't happen by accident. There's meetings, there's a record. We'll talk in a second, the Inspector General's report that was issued is all about the ways in which McCabe was leaking when he shouldn't have leaked. This is not right. Grand juries are supposed to be in secret. They consider the evidence. Oftentimes, evidence that is brought before a grand jury is not used, it's rejected. Oftentimes, indictments are not secured, and it is a gross breach of the law, violation of the law, to be leaking out of the grand jury room, which can only be coming from the special counsel, in my view.
You might have just missed this little piece that flashed by on this video segment, but it's talking all about what a horrendously terrible guy Mueller is. And it said that he was the longest presiding FBI director since J. Edgar Hoover, another famous rogue.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who say, rightly I think, looking at the history of the FBI, that the temptation of the political types who end up running the FBI. Sorry, Charles.
We got another battery problem. I apologize. It's been a very long day of broadcasts.
All right. You should not invest in battery coins.
Okay, I think we should be back.
Good.
I think we Okay, sorry about that, everyone. A little battery problem there. There have been a lot of broadcasts today. I had David Hawkins, we had Lee Stranahan, which we'll show everybody tomorrow, and now we're through another set of batteries. Very sorry for that.
Are there any others that need to be checked?
I think the rest of them are doing well.
All right. So you were saying something about the longest serving
FBI criminal, director since J. Edgar Hoover. There's a real problem at the FBI, and it's got to be rooted out. They're just bringing in the former criminals to defend the current criminals.
Well, as I say, I think it's a problem not with the whole FBI. I think it's a problem with the people at the...
Just the ones in charge.
Well, yeah, but I think that's an important distinction.
It is.
That, and what I worry about here, and what I believe actually could likely be the case, is that people in the IRS, in the FBI, in the Department of Justice are able to get their hands on files and maybe even take these files out of their offices. And there could be very damaging stuff in these files that could be very useful if you go into private practice at a law firm, big law firm, or if you decide that maybe actually with all this damaging information, if you find out damaging information about Republicans and Democrats, Republican presidents and Democratic former presidents,
Right.
suddenly you can say, you know what? Guess what?
We run this thing.
We run this, this puppy. And I think that is what may likely have happened, as we'll go into in a few more minutes. And I'm hoping that we can now root it out. So this is on a somewhat lighter note. This one here is really disgusting. That somebody would have gone into UVA, which Thomas Jefferson conceived of and founded, and put on his statue the words racist and rapist. I mean, it's just outrageous behavior. They need to find out who did this. Wouldn't surprise me if it's a professor, but or a student prank or whatever. We've got to get to the bottom of this, and whoever did this, deserves his or her day in court, but deserves to be convicted and expelled from this university. This is just outrageous behavior. You do not do this kind of stuff. So,
poor form.
Yeah. And then in the final one down here, this is actually kind of poignant and actually in many ways reassuring. In the quiet, it was very, very busy in the last several days on the Thursday and Friday, but here we have this congressman, Steve Stockman, a conservative Republican, unlike Corinne Brown, who's a Democrat. He is now the second or third person to be found guilty in a federal fraud trial involving a small charity. I think the amount involved here is $1.3 million. That's more than Bill Clinton got in any one speech, but I bring this up to say he faces a lot of time in prison over a conviction on a relatively small 24 felonies. He was charged this last March. I don't know if that means last month, or yeah. I mean, this is a rapid justice, again, in Texas, for a relatively small set of crimes. He was a politically active guy. He tried to run for senator. This is money laundering. This is public corruption. This is charity fraud. Okay, so people do get convicted for it.
Yeah, and I know somebody else who's ripe for getting convicted for similar crimes.
How much are you talking about in his case?
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about the charity fraud that I have evidence of, there was certainly $15,000 raised on this program, but as I understand from working with you, it's the solicitation of $250,000 that's the crime. I also suspect this individual is linked to Steam It, which evidence seems to show is a financial fraud that has a market capitalization of $440 million right now.
So in the case of Corinne Brown, she went away for 5 years for $800,000 of charity fraud. And I hope what they're doing here is sending a message that the days where we embrace charity fraud and promote charity fraud and encourage members of Congress and others, former presidents, to pay for their lavish lifestyles running charity frauds, those days are over. And I hope this conviction, the day before Friday the 13th, and then what happened on the 13th, is a prelude to what may start happening next week, as soon as next week, with developments in this Clinton Foundation and other related frauds. I'm just hoping that this, at least it may not happen that quickly,
right,
but what a nice way to have some momentum during Comey's book tour, of saying about that tour.
Right, ring in spring with some delicious indictments.
Ring in spring by retrieving the bling.
Exactly, that's a great idea.
And I learned that from Jesse Jackson. So, want to talk a little bit here. We were going to do, I didn't know Lee's temperature on this. Lee Stranahan is a remarkable journalist who's working for a remarkable organization, in my experience, Sputnik. Mm-hmm. I've now had quite a few pleasant experiences with their highly professional team, including Ekaterina Blainova over in Russia and a Northern Ireland man here in Washington, D.C. named Marty Seif. But here we have, and we don't have to dignify this with pulling up this particular link, but here we have Victor Pinchuk defending his giving $150,000 donation to the Trump Foundation, and
Right.
the breathless, yabahos over at MSNBC and CNN pretending to be journalists and being paid all this money. Say, oh, Mueller has it now. Victor Pinchuk gave a $150,000 donation to the Trump Foundation. We should really care about that. Okay? If you want to get into Victor Pinchuk, which I would highly encourage the real investigators who I think are very actively involved in looking at the Clinton Foundation. You want to talk about Victor Pinchuk? Let's talk about Victor Pinchuk. That's what we're going to do. This is the story where they're trying to say that Trump has a Pinchuk problem, or a Trump Foundation problem over this $150,000 payment to his charity that may have been in connection with a speech. You're going to make an issue about that, okay?
Trump gave his speech.
Yeah. So let's get into that a little bit. If we go back into the slides, let's hit this click here, and let's see how much money it is alleged. If we go down, I think I had it, yeah. Do you see the Victor Pinchuk Foundation anywhere? Like right there?
Right here.
And how much did they give?
Well, they're here in this list for 10 million to 25 million.
Right. It would seem to me that is 10 million bigger than $150,000?
Yeah.
And is 25 million a lot bigger?
It is.
It's
and
like,
is the Wasserman Foundation related to Debbie Wasserman Schultz?
No. I don't know if she's related to the Los Angeles famous MCA Wassermans.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know actually, but
this is a rogues gallery right here.
It is. It is.
The postcode lottery, we've heard about that.
Right. We've talked
the
about
Rockefellers,
many
we've heard
of
a lot
them.
about that. Cheryl and Chaim Saban,
Dennis
Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. What?
You know who's not on here?
Charles Ortel.
He'll never be on that one in this foundation. But the government of Kuwait they gave 25 million to the Clinton Bush Katrina fund. Why aren't they in the list?
I don't know.
Because people don't want you to know that
Yes.
they did that. But they're
Keep
going to
it
find
secret.
out about that in the coming week.
I think that falls into the category of I lied to you because I thought the truth would upset you.
That's right. That could be a country music song, right?
That was something
Why do
someone
I
said
lie?
to me one time. I was like, that's the reason they invented lying, I think.
Right. So this is Ira Magaziner. I'm so careful with my disclosures, and here you find there's another foundation. If you go down to the 1 to 5, you've got the Olena Pinchuk.
Is that his wife?
That's his wife. Okay, she is listed here as Olena. Okay.
Okay.
Now this is a listing that is so absurd. None of this squares precisely with anything the way it needs to square. But the IRS, if they want to get to the bottom of this, could indeed check all this out.
Oh, so this is the Clinton Health Access Initiative. Right. Now, they generate these lists, why?
Well, because they think it's a way around the rules. So in California and in New York, and for the IRS, you have to list the details on all your major donors, donor by donor, address by address, amount by amount, whether there's a conflict of interest. You've got to lay it all out for
What makes someone a major donor?
Whether you give 2%, during the year, 2% of the total revenue of the charity.
So it's got nothing to do with the dollar amount.
Right.
If you only collect $50,000, but one person gives you the 50, you need to publicly list that somewhere?
Well, I'm not sure if 50 is right. There's a short form for lesser amounts. Let's say if you're $1 million and you're the 990 version versus the 990 EZ. Right. If you're in that, it's 2% of that number. And so this is a way of pretending that it's a misleading way of pretending that you're complying with the rules, when in reality, you haven't complied with the rules. In New York and in California, you have to absolutely list out every single government grant, right? We've been through this before. Chai has never done that properly. The Clinton Foundation, no part of the Clinton Foundation has ever done that properly. And on the IRS, as we're going to be documenting in coming weeks, there isn't a single IRS filing by the Clinton Foundation that complies with the regulations. Starting at the very beginning, they don't even use the right name, the right address. I mean, there's small errors and gigantic errors. But anyway, here we have a second entity that has given between 1 and 5. So we're talking 11 to 30 million has come from the Pinchuks to the Clintons that we know of.
Right.
Now we go to another one. If we go back into the, then you have a commitment to action. We've been through that before. Here I searched it. It should be down here. Here's the Victor Pinchuk Foundation gives some kind of, why don't we hit the read more and see what it says. In 2008, this esteemed oligarch came up with a worldwide studies program to train a new generation of Ukrainian leaders to modernize Ukraine, okay? This is 2008. This is the Clinton Global Initiative. Mr. Pinchuk, you're a smart guy. There was no Clinton Global Initiative in 2008. There was no legal entity. There was no authority to do it. This is not a charity, this approach. Did you give any money? Who'd you give it to? Who cashed the check? What office did you give the money?
Where did it go?
Where did it go? You might want to check a few things like that if you're serious about this. But I don't believe they are. I think this is clearly, in my mind, a fraud, the Clinton Grifters Initiative, Global Initiative, that anybody would want to give money through it or towards it or near it is highly suspicious. So what happened? If we go into the slides, you'll see we have, this article may not come up. This is an article in the Wall Street Journal that showed that, or alleges that while Hillary, you won't get the whole thing, while Hillary was Secretary of State, that she hosted a dinner attended by Victor Pinchuk. What was Victor Pinchuk trying to get out of this dinner?
I don't know, but it's interesting because someone who I used to work with who likes to dox my ex-wife because she's Ukrainian is trying to somehow link her to this. I hope all of his people expend all of their energy trying to do that.
Yeah.
It's a big waste of time.
So if we go back into the...
That's the thing, it's like Ukraine is a whole entire country, and like Thailand, somebody tried to implicate someone as being a criminal just because they were in Thailand. I don't know that that's really valid.
Yeah. Well, on that basis, anybody who lives in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area is probably some way crooked. So here we have this link, and you can just have to X out. This is their request. This is a solicitation that is occurring right now, where the Clinton Foundation is breaking the law because their papers are false and materially misleading and stand uncorrected in the public domain. But they like to raise money. Don't give them any money. This is a press release on the day that Unitaid was created, okay? Where the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative announces partnership with the Victor Pinchuk Foundation, okay? What do we know about the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative?
Never existed.
It certainly did not exist on September 19th, 2006. So how much diligence can these smart people have done? And what were they really doing in the Ukraine, saying that they were helping distribute drugs in the Ukraine? What I fear could be the case, and I have been to Ukraine, I think it was 15 times or so.
You went to Ukraine 15 times?
Maybe 10 times.
It's kind of crappy. I went there once.
Did you go to Odessa?
I went to Kiev. I shouldn't say it was crappy, but the most notable thing about it, in my view, was that it would be like the most rundown, lousy apartment building with like graffiti and broken windows, and then like a Maserati dealership right next door.
Yeah, it's definitely unequal economic results in Ukraine, and there are parts of it that really are very, very bad. But central Kiev, or Kyiv, however they pronounce it,
there's nice parts,
beautiful parts. There's two churches right that area. And then Odessa is very interesting. I've been there, spent almost a month in Odessa actually, on different trips.
They have famous steps there.
Yeah, and but beautiful old palaces and interesting restaurants. And actually Donetsk, which has now is where all the fighting was when I was there, very nice. But so they didn't do any due diligence. And then on this, hit this one in here, this is, please hit that one rather. This is
Billy Boy.
With who?
It's Bubba and Elena.
And what did Magaziner say? It was Olena.
See, and that's interesting because Elena is definitely a Russian, a woman's name that I've heard. Olena, I have not. They got a super techno crane in the background there. Jib Camera will be happy to see that. And look, it even looks like it says Technocrane in Russian.
Well, you can read Russian?
No, but TEX,
Yeah.
Techno, kind of looks like that.
So
maybe it's a Russian copy. Sorry, too much crane conversation.
that's all right. So we go back into the slides. We know, before we hit any other slides, we know the Ranbaxy problems. We know that those problems started, any drug shipped by Ranbaxy prior to May of 2013 are drugs that people really should be asking themselves, you know, what was the true quality of it? And I was starting to say that in Ukraine, there are many virtues of the place, but in Ukraine, one virtue, if you want to be a smuggler, is that there are large, lengthy borders that get you into Western Europe that are porous. And so you you ship your contraband into Ukraine, you smuggle it then into the richer markets, you sell it on the black market, you make lots of money.
Drugs,
and,
I'm sure.
And you know, Ukraine, Mr. Pinchuk's, I think, if I have this right, I believe his father-in-law was one of the previous leaders of Ukraine. So he has, you know, immense ties and contacts in the country. This is a good Sputnik story, which I put up for a reason. Just to give you a sense, this is not my friend Ekaterina Blanova, I don't think, but this is a long story about, that's worth reading. I won't read it out loud now, but it traces the tangled history of Viktor Pinchuk. Yeah, he was the son-in-law of the former Ukrainian President Kuchma, detailing an alleged money laundering scheme. You know, and now obviously we have to be careful, and this is a Russian publication talking about Ukraine, and obviously there are serious fighting going on even now in the eastern region of Ukraine. So, but nonetheless, this is a long, interesting story that, you know, before I took money in a foundation from a donor that had these kind of questions attached to his money, I probably would say, this is not somebody whose money I want, you know? And nonetheless, as we've said, they have admitted, that is the Clinton Foundation and Chai, to taking between $11 and $30 million through the most recent declaration periods that we know about. Who knows how much additional money may have been sent to Clinton projects? Who knows whether any of the money actually hit the Clinton Foundation? Who knows what entities it went to? But you want to make an issue, Mr. Mueller, of $150,000 in a speech that Trump may have had with his foundation? You damn well better get into this.
Man, Bob Mueller should be watching this show, Charles, because how does he miss all this stuff?
He's paid to miss.
Paid to miss.
Yeah. So
paid by the hour.
Evidently. And then there's an even longer story in here. This is it goes on and on and on, this particular story, tracing the history of Viktor Pinchuk's involvement, going way, way back into Ukraine trying to improve its image, Pinchuk being an intermediary. And I think, just as the standard Clinton approach, we've been over this time and again, is they accuse their opponents or their enemies of the very behavior that they themselves are practicing. So how much dirty Ukrainian money went into the 2015-16 election cycle trying to ensure that Hillary Clinton would be the president of the United States? And I think these are very fair questions.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's pure Saul Alinsky tactics, the rules for radicals, which
Sure.
everybody knows. Hillary wrote her college thesis on Saul Alinsky, but there's someone else who's using Alinsky tactics, accusing me of what they are doing: gang stalking, phone hacking. These are things that I don't have the capability to do and I'm not doing, but there's loads of evidence to show that they've done that. And then they accuse me of that. I wonder what else they've accused me of that they themselves are doing.
I think you just look down the list of what they're accusing you for, and
Yeah.
that's probably what they're doing.
Exactly.
So back in the slides. All right, this is this one here.
Bottom one.
Yeah. All right, so this is Sarah Westwood, is somebody who has written about me. She's a very good journalist. She does a lot of interesting work. This came out during the WikiLeaks, or around, as the WikiLeaks were gearing up, I think, to be exposed. This shows that Hillary lied about meeting with Victor Pinchuk.
This guy looks like the Russian Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
She lied about meeting with
That's the essence of email made public to show you this business was invited to Hillary Clinton's home, despite her spokesman's insistence that the donor never crossed paths with Clinton while she served as Secretary of State. It's like, oh, so you lied.
What
Okay.
else is new?
Yeah, that's what she does. But my point here is merely only an idiot would believe, knowing what we now know about the sloppiness in the Clinton Foundation, to put it mildly, the existence of multiple offices, undeclared offices of the Clinton Foundation, and the sloppiness up in Chappaqua that we lampooned in that famous cartoon of ours, of yours.
It's ours.
That only an idiot would believe that multiple intelligence services don't already have all of these emails. All of them.
There's no shortage of idiots around, Charles, I can tell you that much.
Right, and so, you know, we the American people, I think, have been put in the position by these grasping politicians and some of their corrupt donors of basically putting a for sale sign on the American government and allowing corrupt donors to monetize their political influence, getting no-bid deals and other favors out of the crooked politicians they then conspire to elect. Donald Trump is a foil to all that. He's a threat to all of that. And so, you know, I think a lot of people are doing their level best to try to stop him, and he shows little sign of giving up. But I hope that we are going to finally see these real emails. We're beginning to see the real text messages. And oftentimes what will happen, the way I have gotten somebody in the past in a battle, is they provided what they purported to be all of the information. When
Right.
you read through that information and you see a letter that says, this is in response to your letter dated blah, 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 blah,
And
blah.
then you say, where's that?
And there's no letter dated blah, blah,
Right.
blah, and all the material that you gave me. So that's the kind of stuff I hope Horowitz and others are onto at this point.
Yeah.
So if we go into 2000, the next page rather. Okay. So we have this absurd story coming out that Hillary Clinton is going to do another fundraiser, and I gather it's possible that she's going to be in New Zealand. But it's possible she could be traveling around the world doing these different fundraising exercises. And I mean, will she not get the message? You know, that you got to stop this. You know, is nobody in the Democratic Party going to stand up and say, you know, you got to stop? But
And what is she raising funds for now?
I don't know. I mean, she's supposedly raising funds to
Yoga and weddings?
to help lead and seed the next generation of Democratic leaders and mentor people with all her experience.
How to lose?
Yeah, I know how to lose.
That would be a great Hillary Clinton seminar, how to rig an election and then lose it. Actually, I wanted to tell you about that. You were talking before about Bernie and everything. You know, Jared Beck put up a post, I think, on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. He's leaving social media. When they returned from South Korea, their home was vandalized. So this is the same kind of thing we see. There are two people working very, very hard to try to fight corruption, to try to fight problems in the judicial system. Who would be against that? I mean, even if you dislike them, this is something we should all want. So to vandalize their home, that seems to me like you support the criminals they're trying to overthrow. Just like all of these malicious, morons who are striking the videos and making fun of me, and making fun of me is fine, I can deal with that. But accusing me of crimes and trying to take out Crowdsource the Truth as a platform, these are very obvious and very overt tactics. After I revealed American intelligence media to be a total fraud, constantly and continually lying and making things up, we also had this phone call from this guy who said, we don't like it that you have this big platform to share information. American intelligence, there was a statistically significant drop in their viewership, not from me attacking their channel, from me just speaking with the guy and asking him questions and having everyone make their own opinions. So we see a pattern and practice of people who like to cheat, people who like to do frauds, people who like to threaten and intimidate, whether it's the Becks or Crowdsource the Truth or whatever. It's not really straight pool, if you ask me.
It's not good. So if we can hit this link here, this is a link to a way for you all to get the report that just came out.
Yeah, this is something we've got to dig into.
Right. But I had a quick moment to read it yesterday, actually. And my biggest takeaway from all this is that it is very clear that there was and is a Clinton Foundation investigation that was, roaring along or moving along in 2016. And I hope Horowitz and his team are going to reveal to us, to the American people, because we deserve to know the course of this Clinton Foundation investigation. We drop now almost daily new information into the public domain. You can check it for yourselves. The audience, remember, for this show, the target audience is the prosecutors, the federal prosecutors, people in the IRS, people in the state governments, the people in the foreign governments who can do something about this fraud. We're talking to you. We're delighted to have this large viewership of other people who are interested and are trying to prod these prosecutors along. But when I read through this kind of a document, which is done by somebody who has no prosecutorial ability, he's studying this. Basically, he's turned it over to the people who can prosecute, and it refers repeatedly. Indeed, the center point of all this is a disclosure that McCabe made that he shouldn't have made.
Oh my God.
What?
I'm going to see if we can determine what was redacted right here.
How can you do that?
Maybe I can't. But
It's got to be. It looks like I think it's page.
it may be, but the fact that it allows me to select, it almost feels like this piece is
like-
underneath it.
It looks to me as if it's shorter than Comey. It looks like it's a 4. Doesn't it look like Comey wouldn't fit in there?
Well, but they already say Comey right before
No,
that.
what I'm saying, it's a 4-letter word as a guess, and page is a 4-letter word.
I could think of some 4-letter words I have for Mr. Comey. Let's see if we... Now, Charles, our mutual good friend, Dr. Corsi, did a lot of work on the birth certificate, and they got into some trouble creating Adobe PDF documents there. I'm going to see if we can use some of those same techniques.
All right.
This is page 7. Let me see if I can remove that little black redaction. Sorry, please.
You can do that while we're talking?
Yeah.
Wow. So anyway, the high-level message in all this, if you read this is a short summary of a small piece of the whole matter, but it shows the level to which the special counsel can go, putting people under oath, checking what they said not under oath with what they said under oath and the contradictions. If you could do all this on this small piece of the puzzle, you've got the Clintons and all their major donors and the accounting firms and the Bank of America and Metropolitan Bank and many others. You've got them on fraud. So the real question is, why aren't you doing anything about it? Why aren't you stopping the fundraising? Why do we have to have, we search a document and on our own presentation to you, the Clinton Foundation has a mechanism to solicit money illegally over the internet. They did it on this show.
Yeah.
Right? They won't give up with us.
Oops.
So maybe we could go, because I'm trying to get us
Yeah,
done
sorry.
with
I'll
this.
focus on that.
So here we have an interesting tweet where the 3 major chairmen are demanding these Comey memos. We'll see if we get them. The talking heads this morning were saying that we're probably going to get them. Actually, not the talking heads. Devin Nunes was saying that he believes he's going to get this memo over the weekend.
They misspelled horrible.
That's true. Yeah. Then we have this thing. We did it, but it's all right. So a senior Fox News reporter is saying that one lawmaker, anyway, is talking about impeaching Rod Rosenstein. Impeachment is not enough here. I think he should be moved out. I think Mueller needs to be moved out. I think that the team needs to be moved out, and then we need to investigate a wider set of issues than just whether one candidate may have colluded with one specific foreign government.
Yeah.
We need to go into what truly happened. I would argue going back to 1998, there should be like a corruption commission that goes in and examines the major awards by our government and contrasts those awards to payments to politicians and their families. And we need to understand the degree to which foreign governments, not only Russia, China, others, even friendly governments, may have been corrupting the political system.
Yeah.
And this gentleman, and Mueller and Comey are the last three people who should have anything to do with any sort of investigation, given the fact that Comey misled the Clinton Foundation investigation that occurred from the Department of Justice side, January of 2002, till it was disbanded in 2005. This guy sat on top of the issue of whether there should be tax fraud prosecutions from the Department of Justice where he worked, and Mueller was head of the FBI from the 4th of September 2001 till the 4th of September 2013. So, I mean, this guy should have been gone long ago. I don't understand why he was hired in the first place, and we need to understand that. Who pushed Rosenstein on Trump?
Yeah.
Who vetted Rosenstein?
Right.
And the whole hiring process for the
What
special
happened?
counsel. Exactly. What the F happened? So, if we go back into the slides, this is a must-read for later. This conservative treehouse thing.
It's become one of your favorites.
It really is. That I think we're going to uncover with luck that what really happened here is not a plot simply to oppose Trump. It wasn't a plot to get Hillary elected. This was a plot that began in June of 2008, when, in my view, when the Clintons and the Obamas publicly reconciled, but when some kind of a deal was cut to allow the Clintons free rein under an Obama presidency to run riot with their foundation, expand the scope of their international corruption and fraud, and impose limits on what the Obama Justice Department might do or the Obama IRS might do to regulate this behavior. So I think this is good work that has been done here by this excellent work done by the Treehouse, and I think the writer is Sundance, goes by the name Sundance, but we have to encourage our friends at Conservative Treehouse to go farther back, follow the full trail, don't miss the true origins. I mean, they knew by June 10th, 2015, the FBI was formally asked and formally opened an investigation, not into every former Secretary of State, but into Hillary Clinton herself, before there was a debate, before there was a primary, and that thing was, in theory, raging. A lot of work was done on it until McCain put the kibosh or slowed it down, Strzok slowed it down, others slowed it down. A lot of people must have known well before the primary started that Hillary Clinton should not be the President of the United States because there was a good chance that she could be in jail, right? And they also had to know that this behavior began way before July 10th, 2015. I'll be curious if we ever see the referral and the report, how far back they checked. I know from looking at the Hillary R. Clinton vault files, now up to 20 at last count.
Oh, wow.
Different ones. We do know now that they didn't look at emails, I think, prior to April of 2009, from memory. There had to be emails flying around before then. And how were those managed? How were those managed prior to her being considered or nominated and considered to be Secretary of State? Don't tell me there were no emails before the election in 2008.
Well,
there were.
Didn't they determine that Peter Strzok was the guy who decided to refer to it as a matter rather than an investigation? So there's matter, there's antimatter, and there's doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, actually, the distinction between matter and investigation is a distinction with an important difference. A matter has not yet risen to the level of being an investigation, and then there are different categories of investigation. There's like, beginning like what you're dealing with probably. You make a decision to turn it into a full-blown, uppercase, bold face, all caps investigation, that's a lot of resources,
Right.
a lot of people, a lot of money, and you're trying to win a prosecution, as they won in the ultimately a prosecution, as they won in the case of Corinne Brown, as they won in the case now of Stockman. So I want to know, the full trail here, and I would encourage people to keep that in the back of your mind. Don't allow the Clintons to sidetrack you and say, oh, this was just dealing with 2009 to 2013. No. This goes way back.
I am hoping for a Helvetica bold, extended, italic investigation.
There you go.
Right now, I suppose it's a matter if they've called me back. But
That's right.
I'm not sure where that will go. Some people seem very concerned about it. They're making videos about it daily.
Oh. So this one, here's our friend, the valiant warrior, Sean Hannity.
When's he inviting you on his show?
I don't know. He's got the guests he knows well, and I've met him once. He's a good guy. But this is interesting because I haven't yet seen the Comey book, and I really don't want to pay for it.
You could wait until after the first week. It'll be $1 on Amazon with all 5-star reviews.
Yeah, it'll be $1 on Amazon with What Happened and Michael Wolff's book and Chelsea's children's book and everything. But apparently in this book, it's alleged in this article that there's secret information saying that had the information become public about the relationship between Loretta Lynch and the Clintons, it would have raised serious doubts over Lynch's relationship with the Clintons. So I think, that is telegraphed. I believe this to be the case. I mean, under Bill Clinton, Loretta Lynch became the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, which is based in Brooklyn. And then under Obama, she replaced Holder. Don't tell me that overtures weren't made to Loretta Lynch saying, look, just go through the motions. It's a matter. It's this.
It's a doesn't matter.
It's a doesn't matter, exactly. And when I win, you will be the Attorney General under me. That is, unless you don't want to be on the Supreme Court. You just let us know, right? And
appointed, anointed, whatever.
And then you could tell that to your grandchildren, which is what all the grandchildren topic was all about.
Oh, right.
What do you want to tell your grandchildren? That you're the longest-serving Attorney General of the United States, or the Secretary on the Supreme Court? Which would you like? So if we go back into the,
that is deplorable.
It is despicable.
Yeah.
So this is somebody who needs to rot in actual hell. This is this congressman. He worked at Goldman Sachs. One of my brothers knows him. Another friend knows him. He's now saying anybody, quote, besmirching the reputations of Comey and Mueller will rot in hell.
Wow.
I mean, that's rather strong stuff because it's tough.
What are they, saints?
It's kind of tough to besmirch the reputation of people that Joe DeGenova, who's I'd say been around the block as a former U.S. attorney in the important district where Washington, D.C. is, and so taking on the very sensitive, politically sensitive cases. He said that Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, is a disgrace to the legal profession.
I agree.
As do I. So this guy Himes, I don't know, he's playing to his voters, or I guess are all ultra-liberal types. He's been drinking Kool-Aid for way too long. And Representative, may I encourage you to watch Rowan Atkinson in playing Toby as Satan in hell. Very appropriate in your case.
You're very fond of that segment.
I love it.
Sure.
Have you watched it?
I'm not sure if I've seen that. I'm going to have to take a look.
Oh, maybe when we're done, we'll watch it quickly.
Take a look at that.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So if we continue along here, here's a story that I haven't wrapped my mind around yet. It's a very lengthy story in The Guardian.
Is this an ad?
It's pretty well written, and it's about this Cambridge Analytica files, and it makes allegations. The Cambridge Analytica hacked Facebook sensitive information on tens of millions of people. Now, if that is the case, I have a serious problem with Cambridge Analytica, and I have a serious problem with Facebook.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have, in the passage of time here, deep discussions about the business model of a company that says, all right, everything that you give me will be safe, don't worry, and we're not going to monetize your personal data, your contact information. We wouldn't do that. And then A, they monetize it, and then B, with all the money created at Facebook and all the value, the notional value in Mark Zuckerberg's wallet and the founders, with all of that, they didn't decide it was important enough to spend the money and ensure that this information would remain safe. I got a real problem with that, serious problem with that. And I think a lot of people, may well have quite a legal case against Facebook, and I would not be betting on the long-term growth trajectory of Facebook. I think Facebook is in existential crisis now to a level that has not correctly been perceived by the trustees, and I mean the directors and the big investors in Facebook.
How do you like the cigarette baby T-shirt this guy is wearing?
Yeah, I don't even want to think about it. So we're almost done.
Interesting character.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard about that Cambridge
it's
Analytica whistleblower.
It's worth. And then, so then we have this issue of whether Russia and the United States are actually going to lock horns with us. This is actually, I forget the name of this, but this is, it might be the Investment Watchdog blog or something like that. I forget what it is.
I've seen that logo
Yeah,
before.
they have some interesting stuff. You have to, anything on the internet you've got to check, and certainly anything out of the New York Times or Washington Post, you should check it, assuming it's probably wrong. But this would make sense to me, that we were going to have Russian planes up now and American planes in the same airspace. We got French planes, we got UK planes. Of course, the Germans, who are welcoming all these Syrian migrants, they didn't help with any of this.
Oh.
And the Italians who are complaining about all these migrants, putting up the fences, they didn't help with this. They just rather complain.
It's hard for me to, I just can't support it at all, because it's just totally based on a lie. I mean, it's so reminiscent of the invasion, the disastrous invasion of Iraq, where they make up a story, they give you some kind of presentation, whether it's on the news or in the case of Iraq at the UN with Colin Powell, and they're just like selling this story like really hard. I don't buy it.
Well, if we go back in, we're almost done. This is a preview of what we will be talking about all next week. This is, there was an entity, we haven't really dwelt on it very much, called the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund. This is an official, this is the government news agency of Kuwait, okay? And we could ask ourselves, what's the possibility that they would be lying about this statement? And we go down it.
I say the possibility is strong.
No, not in this case. The 30th of August, 2006, a year after Katrina, okay? This is, Kuwait is honored for its generous donation to the Katrina relief efforts by this person, okay? In a gesture of appreciation, the American Red Cross has honored Kuwait for the $500 million donation, okay? That it made.
Sorry to interrupt you, but Baton Rouge, Louisiana, isn't that exactly where Barry Seal was murdered?
Could be, yeah. But, so here's this guy, the leader, I think it's the what does it say he is?
Sabah al-Ahmad.
The leader of the country, Sheikh Sabah al-Ahmad al-Sabah. Now, I know one of his relatives very well. And I've been to Kuwait several times, actually. So he's scheduled to arrive in Washington, D.C. September 4th, 2006. The books and records for the Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund closed as of September 30th. 2006. If we go down this a little bit further, what does it say here?
It says,
during his visit to the United States last year, which is right after Katrina in 2005, August, early September 2005, the actual date I think is the 6th of September or 7th of September 2005,
yep.
He presented a check of $25 million to the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Relief Aid Fund during a meeting with the former Presidents George Bush and Bill Clinton. Okay?
Well, this was the real generosity here, was he gave him another $25 check.
Yeah, I saw that.
This was like
$25 million for you and $25 for you.
Yeah, that's like the Tooth Fairy also gave a generous donation.
Yeah, they left in Kuwait a million. So
yeah,
that's a minor thing. But here's the problem. Here are the series of problems.
Yeah.
This is showing that in early September 2005, a check for $25 million was cut by the government of Kuwait
Right.
to the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund. That government grant, there are no government grants listed in the New York State form, California form, which I'm not sure if that one is actually, but there is a New York form, or the 990. There's no government grants disclosed for the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund. And when you do the math, as we're going to lay it out in this coming week, we have information from many donors, and we add, just like in the case of the HIV/AIDS stuff, you add the amounts that the owners claim they gave. This is $100 million.
Well, but it's just so rife with errors. I don't know. This is the Kuwaiti.
No, but there's multiple other ones that cross-check it. This is trustworthy. It's errors, but it's a translation from Arabic into English.
Yeah.
But there are multiple other examples.
I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying the whole thing is screwy.
Well, we have. This is not something. This is legitimate concern here. The Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund. First of all, there was no Bush-Clinton-Katrina Relief Fund. It was the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund. Period. That was not legally organized until the 4th of October 2005. So if you give a check to something that doesn't exist, it's kind of tough to cash it, typically.
Well, I mean, this is maybe a stupid question, but just even the notion of a check for $25 million. I directed a film in Dubai one time, and getting amounts of 10,000 out of Dubai was incredibly difficult. Now, obviously, I'm not a government or whatever, but it just seems like a check is not the instrument you would use.
It's probably like to have a photo of the check. But
yeah, one of those like Ed McMahon checks where it's
right,
like a
exactly. Yeah, but in this case, you're talking about the leader of the country of Kuwait. So
he's got just some pull with the bank.
He said, "Hey, take this out of the government account, not my personal account." But the point being is that the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund is a gigantic fraud. It was not organized right. It was not operated correctly. There are records. They're of course not on the Clinton website, but we've retrieved them. A dogged bunch of volunteers. We're going to be laying this out on this coming Wednesday. We're going to lay out. We'll have some stories in the print, some radio interviews and things like that. But we will lay out some documentary evidence and closing in on Wednesday of this Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund. And those of you out there who think that all I care about is persecuting the Clintons, you're wrong. I also want to persecute high-profile people, members of the Bush family, who may not have taken it to the same extent as the Clintons, but have allowed multiple charities. In the case of the Bush family, it's the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund. There's a fund in 2008 for recovery in southern states. There's the Clinton-Bush-Haiti Fund, and there's also the Tsunami Fund in 2004 and 2005, all of which are, frauds.
Frauds, yeah.
So we will be exposing, just on this week, we'll be boring in on the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund and sharing evidence with you. And we're even going to engage the crowd. We're going to provide lists or pathways to list these donors. I've already found in the first year, October 4th, 2005, September 30th, 2006, the largest donor to the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund basically was a complete front job, fraud, got $24.4 million out of $78 million in grants. I got their paperwork. You're supposed to have a true independent accounting firm. Yeah. And you have...
Not BKD.
Well, that's even worse in this case. They took the CFO, supposed CFO of this recipient that gets $24.4 million, and guess who is the independent auditor? That guy. The same CFO. You can't do that. Yeah. And then an important piece of it is this thing is sent $24.4 million. It has by Bush, Clinton, Katrina, gets some other money up to like $26 million. It gives total grants of like $8 million, and there's no detail on the grants. They provide no detail in the form, which you have to do in that fraud. So the biggest donor of the fraud, the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund, is a fraud, 20.4. The second biggest one is $5 million to some library council whose total revenues should have been at least $5 million, are shown as being less than $1 million. And that thing disappears and isn't registered in New York either. And then that's just 1 year. So the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund came together around September 2005. It's a very sensitive moment. What was happening? What could you look ahead and see might be happening in 2006 if you're Hillary Clinton? You have to run for re-election as a senator.
Yeah.
You need money for that.
Right.
And then you announced for president on January 20th, 2007. So they had a fundraising plan in place. They needed to get money together. What better way than to have leaky charities that evidently existed here that you could steal, divert, take, appropriate, whatever you want to say, as much of that money as possible.
Yeah.
We will be going into that bigly. Shame on the Bush people for not standing up and stopping this.
Well,
Shame on them.
Bush, they're
Both of them.
Yeah, they're like the founders of the swamp, practically.
That's right. So with that, I've got us. This is a record. If we end soon, I will have us in...
Hour and 58. All right, let's wrap it up. So what we'll do, Charles, is tomorrow, because we've sort of rejiggered the schedule here, I'll present the Lee Stranahan interview tomorrow because there's been so much broadcasting today, and we still have Quinn Michaels. I'm not sure if Quinn wants to begin at 6:30 or 9:30. We like to do these little plays on 9/3.
All right.
So back later tonight with Quinn Michaels, and of course the Crowdsource the Truth 2 YouTube channel has been reinstated. Sometimes the problem with YouTube is they are a very big company and a big bureaucracy, and I think that some of the malicious actors that we've been talking about today who appear in video to be mentally unstable, I can't make that judgment from a clinical standpoint, but they make some crazy videos and some crazy allegations. They're taking malicious actions because I believe they are very adept at gaming the algorithms on YouTube as far as how to strike videos with downvotes, how to know what we say that is susceptible to receiving a strike, and they're doing that, and then they go and they say, I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't strike your video, but I think it's like Brer Rabbit not wanting to get thrown in the briar patch. These guys are so obvious in what they do.
They live in the patch.
They live in the patch. They are the swamp. So if people like what we're doing here at Crowdsource the Truth, and if you want to see more broadcasts throughout the year with Charles Ortel and Lee Stranahan and all of the great guests that we bring on, please become a sponsor on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I apologize that this particular show did not go out correctly on Patreon. It will be posted immediately after. The material is always free on YouTube, so long as these malicious deep state dunces don't keep striking the videos. You can also get it at periscope.tv/CSTheTruth. And some people were commenting on Periscope that there was bad latency. I did see that, but when I hit refresh, it's working well now. Cynical Bloomer is very convinced, rightly so, that Charles has his presentation well thought out and wants to not get sidetracked too much. So that's a little bit something I'll have to listen to. And then Jen wanted to talk about Haiti. There was a question here from Jen 2020 that I apologize, Jen, it's gone away, but Haitian general getting bribed, we'll have to revisit it. Have we done an episode specifically about Haiti yet?
I think so.
Okay. I mean, we've spoken
Pirates
a lot.
of the Caribbean.
Oh, right. Yes, exactly. All right. Well, and people can also sponsor Charles with a one-time sponsorship payment at paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. Cryptocurrency is still a way that people can support Crowdsource the Truth. I understand that I need to get a SegWit wallet, so I don't know. I'm becoming a little bit less enthusiastic about cryptocurrency since I've discovered the myriad ways that it can be manipulated. I think that blockchain is a promising technology that holds a lot of possibilities for the future, but when we have these unregulated markets, we can see how they are very susceptible to fraudsters. When you have 501c3s that regulators aren't enforcing the regulations on, well, we see people commit fraud in the way that Robert David Steele has, and he hasn't even defended himself against that accusation because unlike the accusations leveled against me, that accusation is true and supported by facts, and evidence. So I'm going to be putting together a case during the week that demonstrates evidence that I have that indicates, and I'm not sure, I'm going to put this out there so legal professionals and others can evaluate it. I believe there is a fraud on the court being committed, that it's being done as a conspiracy, multiple individuals colluding to perpetrate this fraud. We spoke to Lee about the strategic lawsuit against public participation that he has been hit with along with Alex Jones, and I believe something exactly similar to that is happening to Crowdsource the Truth. But thank you for coming in today, Charles. There was a lot of very important news with the Syria strikes, and I'm glad we got to all this stuff. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I will be back very soon with Quinn Michaels. That will be later tonight. Please tune in for that. Thanks for watching, everybody.